Bible controversy, making this video on how I calculate the Passover date and time. Yakasha from Mexicans Are Hebrew Israelites and the Northern Kingdom Prophets channel suggested the topic on how I calculated the Passover date and time. So here I am, we're doing it. And it's just the way that I calculate it for myself. I'm not saying that I'm a teacher or anything. For me, there's one teacher, and that is Yahweh, and I try to follow him as best as possible, and I'm his student. So that's the way I'd look at things. But regardless, I think I like to share how I calculate the Passover date and time. Here we go. All right. So we can start off in Genesis 1, verses 3 through 5. And it goes like this. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. Genesis 1, verses 3 through 5. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. All right. So here we can see that in Genesis 1:4, it says, "And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness." Now, when you divide a whole thing, which would be the day, right, into two parts, which would be day and night, you have half day, half night. So that's how it was divided, half and half. So basically, there's an astronomical event, oftentimes referred to as the equinox, that will give you equal day and equal night. Although, you know, what they say is that it's not exactly equal, but I guess it averages out to be equal around the world. But if I'm looking in my particular space where I live, that comes out, I believe it's, let's see here, is it March 17th? Okay, and I checked also for Israel too, and I think in Israel you get something like, I think it's 12 hours, 1 minute of daylight, and 11 hours and 59 of night. So it's really, really close by 1 minute. So it's pretty good. Anyway, so let's just call it the equinox, because I need to have something to call it, or I could call it equal day or equal night, but I'm just going to call it equinox. But when I say that, just know that it means, for the purpose that I'm using here, means equal day, equal night. Okay, so we know that I can say that, at least in my area and in Israel, almost to the minute, that equinox happens on March 17th. So the way I calculate Passover is, the first thing you need to do is you need to find equal day, equal night. For me, it's March 17th. Okay, and you can see through ancient monuments that the ancients were concerned with these particular times, with the equinox, with the solstice, with the new moons, with a lot of different astrological events. So I'll give you a few examples. In Casa Rinconada doorway at Chaco Canyon is a phenomenon that happens on equinox. It basically, you could see the sun rise along this doorway, and that happens during the equinox. and that's at Chaco Canyon. Also, too, there's a what's called a sun dagger that's in the area as well. And these daggers, they go through the midst of the spiral, also indicating different astrological events. One of them being the solstice. I'm sorry, one of them being the equinox. Okay. Chichen Itza, Temple of Kukulkan. You have the sun serpent that's on the side of the pyramid that happens during the equinox. All right. So there's these monuments around the world that showcase this particular time as being very, very important, enough to work it in the architecture of these monuments, which have stood the test of time. I mean, they don't make them like this anymore. But they were also designed with the purpose, specifically astrological purposes in mind. Okay, and then there's also this is hard to pronounce. The Intihuatana stone at Machu Picchu. So there's a stone at Machu Picchu. It's like a pillar, and during the equinox, it casts a shadow all year round, except for at noon on the equinox. No shadow is cast. So then there's another monument, again, by the native peoples of the land to indicate this very special time, right? So for me, I believe that this is not like a coincidence. Everybody, when you look at these different monuments online, you have these people saying, well, we're perplexed as to what the reason was for all these monuments to be built around. And I for one, believe that they're indicators for the seasons, right, as it's written in the Bible, right? Let's see here. When God created the luminaries, right, the sun, the moon, and the stars. Let's start at Genesis 1:14. And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of heaven to divide it." Let's start at Genesis 1:14. And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years." Okay. So here we have the description of the fourth day of creation, right? And you have lights being given into the firmament, right? And also lights in two great lights, the sun and the moon. It's Genesis 1:16. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. He made also the stars. And God set them in the firmament of heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and morning were the fourth day. All right, so we can see here that according to the Bible, the reason for the creation of the sun, the moon, and the stars is for calculating seasons, right? And how do we know this is because of Genesis 1:14. And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years." So by these lights, you should be able to determine the year, right? The beginning of the year. You should be able to determine the seasons, whether it's spring, summer, winter, fall. You should be able to determine the days, like feast days. And then they should also be signs for you, right? So maybe a sign for me would be the sunset. Sunset will tell you on a Friday that the Sabbath is coming soon. I know a lot of people believe that the Sabbath starts at sunset. I used to think that too, but now I believe that the Sabbath starts at nighttime. And the sunset would be more like a sign, like almost like an alarm clock, like get ready for the Sabbath type of thing, because night's coming. And the reason why I say that is because the first day of creation, right? Because let's start at the beginning of Genesis. In the beginning, God created heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. So, it was darkness before. Verse 3, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light that it was good and divided the light from the darkness. Okay, so we had darkness at first. And we got to remember that the day, according to creation, begins at night, right? And the end of the day is daytime, right? Okay, so if it was darkness in the beginning, there was no sunset because that would be light, right? So Sabbath has to start at nighttime and not at sunset. Like I said before, I think that sunset is a sign that tells you, hey, it's about to be nighttime. And on a Friday, it's like an alarm clock for the Sabbath. Like, okay, you see that it's sunset. You know that Sabbath is going to start really soon. So be ready. That type of thing. Okay. So now that I explained that, let's see here. Okay, where specifically? Okay, right. Okay, so now, we have all these monuments in the Americas that demonstrate astrological events, right? And the one that we're focusing on here is the equinox, equal day, equal night. So you can see in the Bible the story of creation, the fourth day, the luminaries in the heavens. They were created for signs, for seasons, for days, and for years, right? Okay, but we've learned, especially through channels like, Yakashaw's channel, Mexicans Are Hebrew Israelites, and Northern Kingdom Prophets, that the native peoples of the Americas are the Israelites. So then you start looking at, let's see, let me pull this up here real quick. You start looking at 2nd Esdras, I believe it's chapter 13. Yeah, okay, 2nd Esdras, chapter 13. Let's go to verse 40. It says, those are the 10 tribes which are carried away prisoner out of their own land in the time of Osea the king, whom Salmanasar, the king of Assyria, led away captive. And he carried them over the waters, and so came they into another land. But they took counsel among themselves that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt, that they might there keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. So, according to 2nd Esdras 13, you have the northern kingdom leaving Assyria and going to Arsareth, right? A place where never mankind dwelt, which we know as the Americas, to keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. So it would make sense that a people returning to their God with a newfound conviction to right all the wrongs of their forefathers and to commit to following the commandments, which would include feast days, it would make sense that they would set up monuments that would help them to remember and tell them time, like a big clock that everybody can see, when these times actually occur. And I believe that the equal day, equal night helps us to see that, especially if you're talking about the spring. Now, in the Bible, we have a phrase, they call it the time of life. Now, I've heard somebody explain the time of life, meaning, God has a time for everybody to be born, and that's the time of life. Just like there's a time of death that everybody has to have their ticket punched sometimes, and God knows that before it happens, so that's the time of death. And that makes sense to me. But I don't think when the Bible says time of life, that they're referring to God's knowledge of when you're going to be born. Rather, time of life, I believe, is the springtime. And springtime is the repetition of the creation, right? So in the springtime, what happens? You have animals reproducing, right? You have flowers growing. You have all this reproduction happening on the plant and animal level, right? There's pollen in the air. Everything's flourishing, right? So it's literally the time of life. Again, it's almost like an homage to the creation, like an homage to Yahweh. Like the creation is paying him glory in that it's almost like they're a rehearsal for them, or a recitation that they're being recreated. You know what I mean? That here comes the cycle again, the time of life again, honoring that original creation again. Right? So I believe that the creation happened in the springtime, right? So it's a time of life. And that's where equal day, equal night comes into play for me. Because when you have equal day, equal night in the springtime, right? To me, that marks the spring. Because up until that particular point, you had more nighttime than you had daytime. But after equal night, equal day, right, the equinox, then the number of daylight hours begins to increase, right? And that's why plants do so well. Bears come out of hibernation. Animals start reproducing all over the world. It literally is the time of life. Just like in the creation story, first you have equinox, right? So that happens on the first day, but later on down the line, on the fourth day, you have the creation of the luminaries, which would include the moon. So now, when the moon was created, right, it started off the months. So on the fourth day of creation, the moon was created, and that was the first day of the month. Fourth day in actual existence, but the first day of the month. So the month was created, obviously, after the first day. And a little side note, this is why I me in particular, I don't believe in the lunar Sabbath, because if the lunar Sabbath were true, then the fourth day would be called the first day. You would have first day of creation through the third, but when the fourth day happens and the moon was created, right? Now that fourth day, if you're a lunar Sabbatarian, you would believe that now the fourth day is the first day, which you can see in the story of Genesis, that never happens. It's the fourth day and the creation of the new moon, right? If you believe that it's a new moon, maybe you don't. But, it's neither here nor there. I'm going to assume it's a new moon because new moon and month is the exact same word in Hebrew. So we're just going to say it's a new moon. and that didn't reset the day to the first day of creation. So that's why me in particular, I can't really align myself with the lunar Sabbath, because to me it doesn't make sense. You would have to make it make sense and show me how the creation of the moon reset the day of the week to the first day of the week, and that doesn't happen to creation. So if you look at creation, a lot of things in the world and even the Sabbath, they mimic the creation. It's like I say, it's like all creation pays respect to God through the recitation of the creation. Like every seventh day is the Sabbath day. So every 7 days you have a Sabbath. To me, that makes sense. Also in Spanish, seventh day is sábado, Sabbath. Sábado, Sabbath. This is the same thing, right? So to me, it's every 7 days. I haven't seen anything that would tell me that, okay, the new moon resets the days. It didn't happen in creation, and that the seventh day isn't the Sabbath. So those are two things that would have to be proven in order for me to see it differently. But until now, I haven't seen anything that would actually disprove the points that I brought out so far. Okay, all right. So now that that's out of the way, so let's see here. New moon, according to creation, is a good priority. Okay. All right, let's go to the next. Okay. Right. Okay. And here's another point too. Even in the let me go back here to Genesis. Okay, so you could read here that after the creation of the moon and the sun and the stars, right? After all that, and it says here, let's just read the whole thing. It says, and God made two great lights, the greater to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of heaven to give light upon the earth and to rule over the day and over the night and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the fourth day. So it's saying even after the moon was created, right? It's saying after all this was done, the moon was created, right? New month, the first day of the month. After all that happens, it says, and the evening and the morning were the fourth day. So Genesis just regarded the creation of the moon, right? New month. It's the first day of the month. We know this. But even though all that is true, it's still the fourth day, and that's true as well. So again, that's why I don't believe in the lunar Sabbath, and I don't believe that it's biblical either. So, but that's, maybe I'm wrong. I'm not saying that I have it, but to me, usually the simplest answer is usually the right answer. So it's not very complicated to understand this. At least I don't think so. Okay, now let's see. So now on to, Abib. Okay, so we know that the first month is called Abib, and the meaning of it means means in ear. So here we're talking about in ear. You can read in Exodus. I think it's Exodus 3 and 9. Let me just double check that. Let's see here, Exodus 3, or is it 9 and 3? Maybe it's 9 and 3. No. Oh. Okay. Let's see here. Let's just type in ear. See what happens. Oh, yeah. Exodus 9:31, not 9 and 3. All right. Here we go. All right. So this. Let me read a couple lines ahead, and so I can get a little context. Okay. Okay, so we know here it says here, Exodus 9:31, and the flax and the barley was smitten, for the barley was in the ear, and the flax was bold. Okay, so it's saying here that during one of the last plagues, it says that the barley was in the ear. So meaning that the barley had been at least starting to bud. Okay, so that's what it means for abib, meaning in the ear, right? Okay. So I know there's people out there under the impression that, okay, well, we got to find out when barley is in the ear, and then that's going to tell us when Passover is. But there is no law that says that. There is no law that says, look to the barley, and when the barley is in the ear, then that's when the Passover happens, and you'll know that the Passover happens. Or no, it doesn't, or that's going to tell you when the month of Abib happens. None of that is true. But what is true is the Genesis story, right? When God created the luminaries, on the fourth day. Okay. Genesis 1:14, and God said, let there be lights in the firmament of heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days, and for years, right? So this is helpful. The luminaries, right? The lights in the sky, the sun, the moon, and the stars, they have a purpose, and that purpose is for you to find the years, right? Okay, so should be able to find the beginning of the year according to these luminaries. Should be able to find the seasons. Should be able to find the days, right? Like a Passover day, right? Or the feast days. One of the feast days, you can find them. And for signs, like, sunsets and stuff like that, that will let you know, okay, the evening is about to fall now. We have a sunset. That type of thing. So this is a law. This is a law. God's telling you, okay, look, if you want to find out any information about what time, what season you're in, what day it is, you can use the sun, the moon, and the stars. Right? He never says anything about looking at a green ear of barley to tell the seasons or time. That never happens in the Bible. It's not there. Okay, so we can kind of put that one. I feel we could put it to rest, but hey, maybe not. I mean, maybe you got a verse that you said, hey, hold on a minute. We do look at the barley. Hey, I'd love to see it. Any of this stuff that, if you disagree, I mean, let's base it on scripture. Everything has to be backed up with the law. There has to be a law for it. Okay. So it says here, according to the light, God said, let there be lights in heaven. Okay. Right. Okay. So that's done. I'm just going through my notes here. Okay. Right. So the springtime, which is referred to in the Bible as the time of life, is a repeating cycle of the creation. Just like we have the repeating cycle of the Sabbath, and the repeating cycle of the moon and the sun and the stars. Everything is a repeating cycle, all giving praise back to the Father for his creation. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so it says, all right, so now back to the calculation. It says, so the first new moon after equal day, equal night, equinox, is the first month of the year, which happens on March 31st. No, I'm sorry. So the first new moon after equal day, equal night is the first month of the year, which happens on... Oh, it is. Yeah. It happens on March 31st. So, okay, so you have the equinox happening on the 17th of March. Then you have the new moon, which would be the first moon after the equinox, just like in creation. So first you have the equinox. Then you have the new moon, right? So equinox happens on March 17th. New moon happens on March 31st at 11:24 p.m. Okay, now since the moon becomes since the moon becomes a new moon on the evening of March 31st, that means the evening of March 31st is the beginning of the day that we begin to count, okay? And what do I mean by this? Okay, so take for example, like if the new moon reached new moon status during the day of March 31st, then you would actually have to count March 30th as being the first day of the month. Because remember, the day begins at night, right? And lasts for 24 hours. So if that new moon happened, say on the daytime in the 31st, it's not really, you can't start counting that day in that night, right? So if it happened during the day, you have to go back to the night that day belongs to. Yeah, I don't know if I'm making it clear enough. Might be a little bit convoluted, but hopefully you catch my drift. So anyway, it happened on the evening of March 31st. That means we can start counting the days beginning March 31st, okay? So if the first day of the month begins on March 31st, then we count 14 days, and then we can cite Exodus 12 and 6 here. Exodus 12 and 6. And ye shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening, talking about the Passover lamb. Okay, so the 14th day in the evening. So, right, so you add 14 days, right? And the 14th day in the evening ends up being April 13th, the evening of April 13th. And so yeah, so that's it. That's how I calculate the Passover day. Hopefully it wasn't too long-winded. Anyway, if you feel that I'm in error, that's fine. Go ahead and make a response video. Give me a comment down below. Although I think it'd be better for a response video, because then more people will get to see it and get to see a dialogue, and we can work it out. Try to work it out. But yeah, I mean, everything has to be based on scripture. There always has to be a law for whatever it is that you believe in. Just like, some people, I was explaining before, some people think that, you can calculate a day off of an ear of barley, and there's no law in the Bible for that. But there is a law for calculating days off the celestial bodies. So there's an example there how it may make sense, even when you're reading scripture, that you would think that since the barley was in ear at the time that the Israelites took part in the first Passover, one would assume that, hey, that's the sign you're looking for. But that evidence is basically circumstantial. You know what I mean? There's no law that says that, right? So we got to conform always to the law, because the law is good and the law is here for our benefit, and the law is truth. It converts the soul. So, and obeying the law, right, is the way that we show God that we love him. So it is a very good thing. So anyway, that's the video, conclusion of the video, and I hope you guys have a blessed day. Glory be to Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shua.